Our guest today is Matt Haughey, who created Metafilter back in 1999, in case you never used it. I like to think of it as a kinder, gentler precursor to Twitter, a more interesting Twitter. Haughey was a creative director at Creative Commons and is now a writer at Slack. But today we're talking about one of his volunteer projects that he recently participated in called Defy Ventures, where he used his internet and entrepreneurship experience to help serve people with criminal histories. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's great. It's been I feel like it's been a while since we talked. We talked back when I did a parenting podcast back when we both had very small children long ago.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Defy Ventures and how you heard about it.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I heard about it on Twitter from Rick Clowes. He's at Google Ventures. Is an investor there, and he was going on and on about this for over a course of a few months. And I was kind of like, that sounds like a cool thing I should do one day. He was always asking for volunteers. I read about the company and the volunteer organization, and they had some really impressive numbers, like their employment rate post prison was very, very high, like 95%. Their relapse rate was like 3% of their graduates head back to prison, and in reality, that's like 50 to 70% is normal. So I could tell they were doing good work. And my employer gave us a couple days off this year to do volunteer work. So when I heard him say, "Hey, we're going to do a trip in March," I said, sign me up and I'll go for it.
Matt, I wonder, with entrepreneurship, there is kind of this idea that a lot of folks succeed after trying and trying again multiple times. You have a ton of experience at this, but was there anything that maybe working with these folks taught you, maybe some new perspectives that you got?
Well, I mean, they're in a really hard position. Like entrepreneurship is hard as it is, but it's going to be hard for them to get loans, hard for them to, almost impossible to get a job, if you have to list felonies and stuff. So their angle on entrepreneurship is coming more out of necessity. Like, they actually have a fund of 0 to, I think, 20 or 30,000 for the best ideas. And they will fund the best ideas that allow them to hire other people from the program as well. So a lot of these things, for them, it's very high stakes. I guess what I learned from that day was, a lot of it was just, learning about the basic humanity of, and getting like an idea of what the number of prisoners in America really means. But seeing those guys, it was just really great. It was just like the ultimate kind of like hustle, that you see in entrepreneurs, that they definitely had as well. But for them, it was kind of life and death. Compared to the kind of stuff I do.
So speaking of hustle, you talked, one of the things in the project they say is transform the hustle. So the idea is that you might be able to use some of the skills that you might have honed in a criminal venture of the past to use to create your own project that is non-criminal. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, at first I didn't understand that. I thought it was more like the idea of hustle and like the whole like do anything, whatever it takes to do something. But it was during one of the pitches that one of the pitches we heard was a construction pitch. And the guy just broke away from like, well, here's what I want to build. Here's what I want to price it for. Here's the market I'm going for. But also, like, consider my experience. Like, I ran a drug corner. I had 2 employees. I bought this much drugs every day. I sold this much. I was way into, like, being very selective with my product. And everything he said, if you just popped in the word, like, construction materials in for whatever he was talking about, made perfect sense. It was like, oh, my God, he's a really great businessman. Like, he knows how to run a small team and make sure, like, the work is very good and you keep your customers happy. Like, these are all basic business things that take people years to learn. And he definitely had it and made that like connection super real for me.
Sort of like move fast and break things.
Were there? I mean, obviously, you can't give away some ideas for people who are starting something if it's maybe a little too secret or too awesome. But were there some ideas that really kind of stood out? I mean, oftentimes, we see a flood and a trend of tech companies all kind of trying to tackle the same problem or issue, but there are lots of great societal problems that maybe tech could address that go unaddressed. Are there any maybe unique perspectives or ideas that came from this group that you're not seeing anywhere else in tech?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't strictly a tech idea sort of place. So a lot of things were just more basic. So most of the ideas people pitched were things that were like, there's a lot of construction-based jobs. There was a lot of like selling and reselling stuff, like basically buying junk cheap and then fixing it up a little and selling it. Like these are super basic things. One guy had like a very ambitious medical startup idea that was like probably beyond, he needed to know programming and security and data warehousing and the medical law structure. But he just wanted small town doctors to give you the same experience you get at like a big university hospital or in a big HMO, which is exactly the problem I have. And I was kind of amazed that a guy inside for 5 or 10 years like understood the same. Like I go to a university hospital for some of my meds and stuff and procedures, and I can pull up any blood test I've taken since like the mid 2000s. While my small town doctor has nothing like that. Like I have to call them on a phone to get any sort of results. And so yeah, like there wasn't really the one cool tech idea was a guy had role-playing game Nation was his like website. He had a website social network idea all about role-playing games and LARPing as well, which I think is hilarious and really weird. And it's hard to find like the person in your city that also wants to like beat each other with foam swords in a park. And I was like, God, if that doesn't exist, it should, to have like a LARPing meetup site.
Right. I mean, I think in San Francisco, it's probably not that hard to find LARPers,
Yeah,
but
maybe
even actually in Petaluma. But yeah, to have an app to find LARPers, that's awesome. So it seems like this whole project is organized in a really interesting way. There's one of the things you write about in your piece on Medium is walk the line, where I guess all the volunteers stood on one side and all the entrepreneurs in training stood on the other side. And then, you asked things you had in common, like maybe childhood abuse, or one thing that was have you ever driven a car while you were drunk? Which you can realize that some of these things that we think, oh, I'm so different than someone in prison, but you might not be so different. Do you think that you learned things about the way the project worked that you could take back to the internet company that you work for, or that other people can learn from just in our daily lives, where we're trying to connect with people who really connect with people who are different than we are?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely gave us like a idea of like how close we were instead of how different we were. There were a lot of shared experiences that were terrible and good. There was like, have you graduated high school? And like 75% of the prisoners did not. And like 2 or 3 of the volunteers did. One of them works at Google. And he just said, is going through a rough patch, and, his company was bought by Google. And these days it would be possible for him to get a job there, but probably difficult. But really it was like, it was mostly teaching us to see these prisoners as people with great ideas who really we aren't much different than. I mean, one of the ones that got everybody to the line was like, have you ever done something illegal but weren't caught? And I mean, people probably do 3 or 4 things a day, that break some law without even knowing it. Or, when I was a kid, I did a lot of stupid stuff. I had no empathy for anybody else. I was just a terrible 15-year-old boy. And I'd been chased by cops, and I threw eggs at cars because I was just completely bored. And like, I never got caught. I lucked out. And that was like super clear in the things we were talking about in that exercise.
Awesome. Well, it really sounds like a fulfilling experience. How else can people get involved if they're listening to this and might want to take part themselves?
Yeah, I think it's defyventures.org, and I think there's a volunteer.defyventures.org where they line up trips. Right now, I think they do these prison trips in the Bay Area and in New York City, and I think they're adding them in Nebraska. They're in 26 prisons right now doing this 6-month program, and they're trying to spread to all. I mean, their goal is every prison in America should have this. And they have really good results. So it's mostly like the wardens and stuff. The prisons really want them to come do this. It's just they need the money to fund all the education, the teaching, and everything. So a lot of it is fundraising and stuff too, as a part of this. So I mean, them going after like well-to-do Silicon Valley types is really smart because everyone's got this entrepreneurship experience and also, has a lot of money to give to organizations. So it works out pretty well for them. But yeah, I would check out defyventures.org.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Matt Haughey writes for Slack. He is on Medium at 15 minutes in the morning, writing some really interesting pieces, whether you're a developer or just interested in geeky stuff. Check it out. Where else is the best place for people to find you?
Probably on Twitter is Matt Haughey.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.